Time.
L'chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim, l'chaim.
Chaim v'bracha. Chaim.
Sometimes there are things that remind you of things in the past. One of the things that the Rebbe writes in that sikha that I was talking about, of Chof Sivan Tov Tes, when he says about how that we have to use our own minds to be able to connect. So the Rebbe brings down also, he says, this type of avodah expresses itself more when it comes to the neutral things in life. Things that there's not a mitzvah. There's mitzvahs, what you have to do when you're not allowed to do. But then we know also that it says, Kol ma'asecha l'shem shamayim. Everything that you do in life, you have to try to have a divine purpose for. V'chol derchecha de'u. Know God in all your ways. That's a very, very. It's an area where you're not told exactly how to do it. You have to do it on your own. Find God in all your ways. Look for a divine purpose in everything. All your actions should be divinely inspired for divine purposes. It's a tall order. Not only is it a tall order, there's not really a Shulchan Aruch for that. There's not a code of Jewish law for that. It's something that you have to use your mind for. How are you going to connect everything you do in your life, even the most neutral, physical, material things, for a divine purpose? You gotta cultivate it in yourself. You gotta develop a sensitivity towards it. You have to work on it. It's not something you're told what to do. The shlach l'chol l'datcho. In other words, use your mind in the world of reshus, of things that you're allowed to do, and it's not mitzvahs. Over there, you have to use your mind even more than before. I want to share with you a story to give an example of what we're talking about. I want to share with you a story that I heard from Rabbi Shur, Olav Shalom. He was one of the shluchim that the Rebbe sent to Eretz Yisrael in 1976. He was sent to Yerushalayim. The Rebbe sent shluchim over 76, 77, 78 to Eretz Yisrael. I was from the 78ers. Half of us were married and half of us were single. I was from the single guys, the bochum. I came in 78. Rabbi Shur came to Yerushalayim in 76. He got married. His wife is from England, the Vogel family. Reb Bobby Vogel, Reb Nosson Vogel, from Golders Green. And he, that was his he's a big Baltstokke, his father-in-law. And one of the businesses that his father-in-law had, as far as I understand, was some kind of a diamond business, polishing diamonds. And it was also not only a factory to polish diamonds, but it was also doing mitzvahs of tzedakah. As far as I understand, there was about 40 families that were having parnosa from this factory. And that was one of the main reasons why he had this factory, to give parnosa to Yidden, to Yiddish mishpachas. And what happened is that Beryl Shur says, I was sitting in my father-in-law's office, and one of the machines in the factory broke down. And it was a very essential machine for the factory. And it paralyzed a lot of the work that was done in the factory. And they had to get a new machine. And the company that produced this machine was a French company from France. So Mr. Vogel, Rabbi Vogel, Reb Nosson Vogel calls up this company in France, and he starts arguing with the company over the price of this machine. They wanted $20,000, and he was only willing to pay $18,000. And they were going back and forth on the phone. And Rebettel, or Rabbi Sholem, Rebettel told me, couldn't understand what was going on. What is his father-in-law fighting about $2,000 when the factory is paralyzed and they can't get on with the work? What does $2,000 mean to his father-in-law? What's the significance? It's a drop in the bucket, and the factory is not functioning. And he's arguing about $2,000. And he says to me, it's a father-in-law, so I kept quiet. Not going to start up with him. And he says the conversation finished. He hung up the phone. He didn't buy the machine because they weren't willing to come down in the price. And he was sitting in the office, and he couldn't understand what's behind the rationale of his father. 10 minutes go by, he says, and there's a phone call. It's the French company. They called him up. They told him, listen, Mr. Vogel, you're a long-time customer of ours. You're committed. We thought it over, and we decided to give it to you for the price that you're asking for the $18,000. And okay, we closed the deal. When they'll be sending it over, everything was closed. He hangs up the phone. And as he hangs up the phone, he takes out his big checkbook. And he opens it up, and he tells his son-in-law, Rabbi Shur, Baruch Hashem, I slugged it out with them. I fought it out with them. I said to myself the whole time, the $2,000, I don't want it going to these French goyim. I want it going to the yeshiva. And that's what I thought about. Is it going to go to them, or is it going to go to the yeshiva? Thank God. They agreed. Writes out a check, $2,000. Yeshiva's term chetmimim. That's a check. And the Beryl Shur tells me, says to me, my father-in-law was on the phone handling a deal with a French company for a machine that if he didn't have it, it was paralyzing his factory. What was he fighting about? Whether the $2,000 goes to the goyim or to give it to the yeshiva. It doesn't say it anywhere in the Shulchan Aruch. It's shlach l'chol hadaita. He was using his own mind. He was connecting to what has to be done as a chassid to give tzedakah, the b'chol drachecha de'eu, to know Hashem in all his ways. As he was dealing in his business issues, his mind was on mitzvah tzedakah b'chesed. And that's what he was thinking. And that the Rebbe says in Chof Sivan, to be able to use out your mind and heart, to be mechaven to what has to be done. When it comes to Yoni or Shus, when it comes to things that are day-to-day mundane matters, over there we have to even be more. Have to use our own minds and hearts to be able to connect everything to what has to be done. And the Rebbe says that from Chof Sivan, we have a koyach even for that. Now I want to share it. There's another thing that came to my mind, and I Farbrengen about it in the past. But it's negayah to every one of us. I got a phone call from my older brother on Erev Shabbos. Calls me up and he tells me he lives in Crown Heights. The yeshiva, he works in the yeshiva. Administrator of the yeshiva, 770. He tells me there's two guys that came to my office today, and they told me that your brother in Eretz Yisrael was in New York for Kinnis HaShluchim about 5 years ago, and he Farbrengen on Shabbos in our shul, and he spoke about a shliach that's in some kind of a crazy place, and that he's trying to build a mikveh. He spoke about the shliach, what kind of a crazy place he's in, and at the Farbrengen, we were both sitting at the Farbrengen, and we both spoke between ourselves that we want to help this shliach out. Each and every one of us wants to give up $500 to help the shliach. But that was on Shabbos. After Shabbos, we forgot all about it. And every so often, we reminded ourselves, it's gone by about 5 years now, and we'd like to help the shliach. We made a decision by the Farbrengen that we want to give money to help him for the mikveh. Can you find out from your brother which shliach was he talking about? And my brother calls me up. It's about 5 years ago. I told my brother, let me think. I got to remind myself. A lot of water. I don't know what the rivers are in Australia. In the United States, you say there's a lot of water that goes through the Mississippi since then. A lot of water. I mean, I have things going on in my life. I don't remember exactly. I sat down, started thinking about which shliach was I talking about. Then I reminded myself. I reminded myself that on Thursday morning, in Kinnis HaShluchim, was after Shachos. And a guy taps me on my shoulder. A young fellow, a young shliach. And he tells me, Rabbi, he says, we have something in common. I told me, yeah? He says, yeah. He says, you were raised in Toronto. He thought I was born in Toronto. I wasn't born in Toronto, but he says, you were born in Toronto and you're on Shlichus in Rehovot in Israel. I was born in Rehovot and I was raised in Toronto. I told him, and you're in Shlichus in Toronto? He says, no, I'm in Shlichus in Saskatoon. In Saskatoon? You have to understand, for somebody who was raised in Canada, to tell me that he's on Shlichus in Saskatoon, I mean, can you think about one of the most craziest places in Australia? That somebody would tell you he's on Shlichus in that place. I don't know. You guys know Australia. I can tell you Saskatoon is in north central Canada. That in the winter, regular weather in the winter is like -30, -40. I think this shliach once put out a video that he throws boiling water into the outside and it freezes as he's throwing the water. That's how cold it is. It's a mining town. I didn't even know that there's Jews there. It's in the pits, as they say. So I asked him, from Saskatoon, there's Jews there? He tells me, how many? He tells me, about 200 families. 200, 250 families. How many Goyim live in Saskatoon? Tells me about 400, between 400 and 450,000 people. So I tell him, can you please describe to me your shlichus? Because, it's not that he has 200 families living in one neighborhood in Saskatoon. He made like a Chabad village in Saskatoon. It's 250 families living in a city of 450,000 people. Can you describe to me your shlichus? And he tells me, I have a personal relationship with most of the families. One fellow I put on tefillin once a week. Another guy I give a shear. A third guy I teach the child for bar mitzvah. He knows everybody in a personal way. Once a month, at that time, he tells me, I make a minyan on Shabbos on Friday night, and I have about 50, 60 people over for a Friday night meal. So what about your kids? How old are your kids? He told me I have 4 or 5 children. His oldest was a 5-year-old, a 5.5-year-old daughter. She's online, preschool online from the Babich Cheder online, from the Shluchim office. What about the rest of the kids? Homeschooling. They stay in the house during the winter. It's dangerous to go out of the house. It's too cold. It's not easy. It's not simple, but it's worth it, he tells me, to be able to be on shlichus and to do what I know what the Rebbe wants me to do. This is the conversation I have with him. I walked away, and then I started to think. I live on a street in Rehovot that has 4, on my side of the street, it has 3 condominium buildings. I live in a building with 34 condominiums. On the corner is another 8. On the further corner, there's about 16, and then next to me is another 16. Across the street, there's another 4 buildings. On my block, I started counting the amount of people that live on my block in Rehovot, from corner to corner. And there's also a falafel store, pizza store in the corner that people visit. And I realized that I have my own personal Saskatoon on the one street that I live on, from corner to corner. So this guy has gone to live at the end of the world, to be able to be on shlichus, to do what the Rebbe wants him to do, to makar Yidden to Yiddishkeit. I've got my own Saskatoon in front of my house. How much am I devoted and dedicated to my personal Saskatoon? All of us can put together a personal Saskatoon. If it's where we work, if it's neighbors, if it's relatives, family, friends, you know what? Not 200. Let it be 100. But that's exactly what we're talking about. We got to use our own minds. We got to start thinking. How can we do it? How can we bring the fotzes hamayonos and the fotzes hayadus? How can we prepare the world for Mashiach? House by house, family by family. Put our minds to it. There's a lady that lives in my community. She lives in a building of 16 apartments, 16 flats, 16 condominiums, whatever you want to call it. She bakes every week on Thursday a small little bilkalach, little challahs, and she gives to every family in her building 3 little challahs with 2 candles, hanging it up on the door knob of each apartment. For years she does it. That's how she brings Shabbos to all of her neighbors. And because of that, she has a relationship with everyone in the building. And they turn to her for Yiddishkeit. They turn to her for different things that they need. The Rebbe didn't tell her she has to bake challah. He didn't tell her to make bilkala. He didn't tell her to give candles out like that way. She used her mind. She used her heart. She thought, what can she do? How can she get into these houses? Who can refuse a home-baked challah? That's what she did. And that's what the Rebbe is expecting from all of us. That we should be using our minds and our hearts. He's given us enough ammunition. He's given us enough koiches. He wants it from us. We have to be the ones to get the job done. It's dira b'tachtonim. He wants us, not milmayla lamata. Not everything that I have to tell you. The whole kunz of Bias HaMashiach is that the world becomes refined and calls out Einoid Mulvadu. The world changes, which starts with us, that we become connected. We elevate ourselves by using our minds and our hearts. Kibbutz Haaretz, the Rebbe says in the Sikha, conquering Eretz Yisrael has to come from us, because that's what it's all about. Going into a land, you have to sow and you have to plow and you have to work, you have to deal with the physical, mundane world. And that's why he needs us to be able to do it. And the Rebbe gives us koyach. Here, I just told you, I'm coming to Farbrengen for Australia, and I get a regards from Yitzchak Harav Groner. To me, it means that the Rebbe is letting me know. You're Farbrengen from Melbourne, Australia. It's a place where Rabbi Groner puts so much energy in. He's mentioned in my letter. You have a letter in Australia. I put so much effort in the country to be able to change the country. And he's letting me know he's with me. He's giving me koiches to be able to help the community. There's no accidents. Everything is Ashgacha Pratis. And the Rebbe gives us koiches. So I want to say l'chaim to all of us. To keep going and to keep connected. And everyone should build their own personal Saskatoon. A list of people that we keep contact with. That we think about them by every holiday. That we put our minds and our hearts, how we can connect them closer. How can we bring the world to a level that we're going to tip the scale and bring to the grand finale? What kind of a special day when we think about it? Where would we be if we didn't have Chof Chesed? Now, I once heard the story from Rabbi Chafer, Olav Sholem, from Beis Rivka. It was by the Rebbe, Tovshin Chof Daled, Shavuos, 1964. The Rebbe Farbrengen, towards the end of the Farbrengen, the Rebbe started talking about that just like it says in Aseres Adibris, Anoichi Hashem Alekecha, Asher Hitzisicha Me'eretz Mitzrayim, I took you out of Egypt. He said there's also Jews that are now living in a personal Mitzrayim. The Yidden that are living in Russia. He says, and just like Hashem took the Jews out of Egypt, he should take everyone out of that Egypt, which is Russia today. And the Rebbe closed his eyes and he was giving a big bracha that the thousands and the millions of Jews that are in Russia should be able to get out. And as finished, he said, L'chaim. And everyone was, it was already 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. Everyone was tired from the long 2 days Yontif. So people answered a sleepy L'chaim. And the Rebbe said, no, L'chaim. The Rebbe said, no. And everyone was sleeping. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe got very, very upset. And he got very, very pale. And he said, millions of Jews could have gotten out of Russia right now from our L'chaim. He said, everyone turns to me and asks me for brachas that their family should get out. And we're by a Farbrengen. And I said, everyone should say L'chaim. And Yeshua's Hashem clarifying. This was the moment. This was the moment. And he pushed his chair back. And he was trembling. And he threw the napkins on the table. He said, what's it worth all the Farbrengens, the Sichas and the Maimorim, when I need to say L'chaim for the Russian Jews and everyone's sleeping? And all of a sudden, everyone got all shocked from when the Rebbe reacted. And the Rebbe said, the kids should start singing in Nigun Shia Samecha. I can't have kindness to the children. The Rebbe started singing Es Nesach, Shloch and Shlofzach. Kids started singing Shia Samecha. And it took a couple of minutes for the Rebbe to come back to himself. And everyone felt that they missed out something. It was an opportune moment for the Klal Yisrael and for the Russian Jews. And we lost it. Next day, Rabbi Chof went into Yechiyas. The Rebbe asked him, how's he going back to Israel? There wasn't direct flights. He says he's going back via England. So the Rebbe told him, I'd like you to change your ticket, go via Paris, because there's an argument going on between the principal of the Beis Rivka and the board. And being that you're an expert in girls' chinuch and you're in Beis Rivka, I'd like you to go to be the mediator between them. Chaim, Shua ben Fima, Chaim. So he went. The Rebbe asked him to please try to work out to make shalom over. The Rebbe told him, I want to pay for the expenses of the changing of the ticket and everything. So he went, flew to France. They were expecting him. Came in the morning, they took him straight to Beis Rivka in Yer. And he worked on, mediated, and Baruch Hashem, he said he had tremendous atzlocha. In a very short time, he worked out an agreement. So he still had a whole day for the next flight. So he asked to be brought over to the yeshiva in Benoit. He wanted to meet with Reb Nissen. Reb Nissen Nemanov, the famous mashpia, Beinoni of Tanya. So he came to Benoit, and he went into Reb Nissen. And Reb Nissen asked him, what was by the Rebbe for Shavuos? because it was before, faxes, emails, WhatsApps, the whole business. So he wanted to hear. So he told him over what happened by the Farbrengen, and he told him what happened at the end of the Farbrengen. But the Rebbe gave a bracha for the Russian Jews, and we missed it. The Rebbe got so upset, and he said, Yeshuas Hashem, millions of Jews could have got out of Russia if we would answer the L'chaim like we mentioned. Rabbi Nissen heard. And then Rabbi Chefer told me, he asked Rabbi Nissen, I don't understand why the Rebbe was so upset. How were we supposed to know that millions of Jews could got out of Russia from answering L'chaim, saying L'chaim? Do we know what's going on high? Are we Rebbes that we know that it's such an auspicious moment in heaven that our L'chaim can make the difference? Why was the Rebbe so upset about us? And Reb Nissen told him back, thought about it for a moment. He said, the Rebbe wasn't upset about us not knowing about the auspicious moment, the Eis Rotzen that was on high. We're not Rebbes. We don't know about those things. I think it's for a different reason, he says. And he told him then, he said to him in Yiddish, he said to him, man wollte gewen genug zugetragen zum Rebben, wollte man etwas gedacht filmen. If we would have been connected enough to the Rebbe, we should have felt something. A child feels a parent, and a parent feels a child. They could be miles away. If something is going on, they feel each other. Wo sind meine nonte Menschen? Where are my close people? That's what the Rebbe was upset about, he says. If we would have been connected and not well enough, should have felt something in the air. We don't have to know what, but something's going on. To that extent is the kind of a relationship that we have to try and work on to cultivate and to develop and to have with our own Rebbe. To be connected to it in a way that we should have that sensitivity, feel. What does he want? What should I do? What's next? How can I advance in the things that I'm doing? Not standing in one place. So I'm going to say l'chaim to everybody. Let's take, here it is. You see it all? Here is Chof Chesed. This is what the Rebbe gave out 30 years ago. Anyone that can get hold of it or find out what's in it, to be able to read it through and learn it through, to be able to connect to the 80th anniversary and to try to live with the different things that we learn. L'chaim, l'chaim.
L'chaim.
Chaim Brach.
Chaim Brach.
Chaim Brach.
Gluckowsky.
Chaim.
L'chaim.
Start digging. I'll be back in a minute.